world is gone.
No one could stand between me and home. Not even the gods.
Keep us free!
Hey everyone, Justin Crumley here with the Cujo Productions channel. Welcome to the Film Cave. It's been a while. I almost botched that opening. So right off the bat, before we get started, I do want to apologize if the audio sounds kind of funny. Unfortunately, something's wrong with my microphones, both of them, or my USB ports are going out, because every time I tried to get the audio, my microphone set up to record the audio for this review, the audio would just not be coming through very good. So, bear with me until then. I'll try to do my best in editing to make the sound a little better, but if it's a little muffled or it's not as great as it could be, like I said, just bear with me. It's going to be that way for a little bit. So yeah, with all that said, a wise man once said, the show must go on. And to be honest, I have been really excited for this video in particular for a while, because this was easily my most anticipated movie of this year. And yes, that includes a year where we're getting a new Spider-Man movie, and we're also getting a new Avengers movie, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So normally I won't spoil things, but for this movie in particular, I'm going to make an exception. It's been out for almost a week now, and it's based on a story that's about 3,000 years old, so kind of hard for me to not spoil some things, or really to issue like a spoiler warning, but I will anyway. This video is going to contain spoilers, so if you haven't seen the Odyssey, Christopher Nolan's Odyssey yet, definitely do so, and then come back to this video and listen to my review. Yeah, that's a movie we're going to be talking about today, is Christopher Nolan's much anticipated The Odyssey. Much like I said, it was my most anticipated movie this year. I don't think I've ever actually really talked about it on the channel before, but I'm actually like a huge fan of Greek mythology, and The Odyssey is one of my favorite stories. So when I found out that Christopher Nolan was adapting this to film, I was pretty excited. So the cast is pretty stacked. It's Matt Damon, Anne Hathaway, Tom Holland, Zendaya, Robert Pattinson, John Leguizamo, as well as just a metric shitload of other big names and big name actors. In typical Christopher Nolan fashion, there's just the cast is stacked. So let's just get that out of the way right now. And I know there was some controversy with the casting, mostly with like Lupita Nyong'o as Helen of Troy, and Elliot Page as a sign-on. Personally, I never really gave a crap about this. For me, I was more excited about Christopher Nolan's take on a story that, as I said, I really loved more than anything. So the casting in this movie didn't really bother me. And, I've heard some people say that, like, they should have had more, like, Greek actors. And I guess I don't necessarily disagree with that. But, like, I don't quite get the outrage about, like, Lupita Nyong'o and Elliot Page, like, being singled out. Like, combined, they're only in the movie for a few minutes. And to be honest, they played their roles really well. Everybody plays their role really well in this movie. I don't think there's really one bad performance at all from anybody. Again, in typical Christopher Nolan fashion. I don't think I've ever seen a Nolan film where any actor has a bad performance, and this is certainly no exception. As far as the plot goes, I mean, it's the Odyssey. If you're at all familiar with the Odyssey, then you basically know what the plot to this movie is. Although there are some changes, and that is where I'm going to get into like spoilers. I would say like that's probably the part of the video that you should skip, and we'll get to that soon. But yeah, as far as my like non-spoiler thoughts go, I thought everybody did really good as far as like acting. The cast was amazing. I thought Tom Holland specifically was like a standout as Telemachus. This isn't really a spoiler, but it kind of is. The Cyclops sequence, which is probably the most famous sequence in all of the Odyssey, just absolutely riveting. And the more I learn about the behind the scenes about that, like the more I just really love that scene. And when I do eventually go back to go see it again, I'm gonna have like even more of an appreciation for that scene, knowing the little bits of what I do now about that scene, which I'll get more into in like the spoiler section. But for now, I'm gonna try to keep it vague. What they were able to pull off with the most minimal amount of CG that they could, because I guess they did use some CGI in this movie. It wasn't completely CGI free, which again, if you're at all familiar with the Odyssey, I think that was kind of to be expected. It'd be very difficult to pull off every little thing in this film with all practical effects, but everything that is practical, that is in camera, it's just astounding. And I personally cannot wait for this movie to come out on like Blu-ray, so we can get more insight on like the behind the scenes stuff. And I know physical media is dying right now, but we got to be able to get this one on Blu-ray at least, like seriously. So yeah, basically to sum up my thoughts, this movie was basically everything I wanted it to be. I was super excited going in. It's really long. It's about 2.5, almost 3 hours. So if you are going to go see it, do be prepared to sit down for a bit. If I do have anything to nitpick in this film, I would say the American accents were kind of distracting, and I do mean like this is very much the nittiest of nitpicks. But movies like this, and this is going to sound a little strange because I know this isn't like an English tale, this isn't an English myth. Films like this that are like modern adaptations of old myths, I always kind of felt like maybe like an English accent just kind of worked a little better with that. I don't know why. Maybe it's like it gives it more of like a more of like a myth to it. There's more of a myth, when they speak like this or something. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Again, I said it was a nitpick, and that's really it. If I did have a gripe about the movie, it would probably be that. In typical Christopher Nolan fashion, this film was absolutely astounding. It was amazing. What they were able to accomplish with the visual effects practically is just a feast for the eyes. The sound design is really good, and I'll get more into that in the spoilers. But yeah, the sound was really good. The cast across the board, really solid. Just yeah, like I said, Tom Holland kind of being a standout for me personally. Yeah, basically nearly perfect. I think this might be one of Nolan's best films. I really do. I really liked Oppenheimer, and I love his Batman trilogy, but I don't know. This was just amazing. I love this film. So now I want to get into the spoiler section of the review. And you guys, if you haven't seen the film and you want to see the film, you don't want to get spoiled, you can go ahead and just shut the video off right here. And if you do, before you go, be sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and yeah. Until next time, I'm Justin Crumley, and this is Cujo Productions saying Stay awesome. All right, guys, for those who are sticking around for the spoilers, you don't care, you already know about the Odyssey, or you've already seen it, whatever your reason may be, maybe you just love the sound of my voice, maybe it's just that, and to that I say thank you. I also love the sound of my voice. Anyway, we're going to talk spoilers for the Nolan film and just kind of compare and contrast it to some versions of the myth. Now, I will say right off the bat before we get into this, I'm not an expert on any of this stuff. I'm not an expert on ancient Greece. I'm not an expert. I'm not educated in any of this. My education background is in graphic design and digital media. I'm not a historian. I'm not a classicist. I don't have a background in like ancient literature or being able to translate any of that. So most of the knowledge I have from the Odyssey is what I've watched on YouTube, as well as, like I said at the beginning of this video, I'm just a fan of Greek mythology, and the Odyssey is one of my favorite stories. So in my free time, sometimes I'll just watch like certain analyses. I will watch certain analyses of the Odyssey sometimes in my free time, and it's just something I do sometimes. I'm not even kidding. The Odyssey is a story that I have periodically come back to, and I just kind of want to lay it out. I'm not really like an expert in any of it. I've just read it. I've watched a lot of videos on it. When I was in high school, my freshman year, I read I think it was I want to say his name is Robert Fitzgerald. You guys can correct me in the comment section if I got that wrong or right. We read the Robert Fitzgerald translation for my class, and just a few years ago on my Audible, I downloaded the Emily Wilson translation, which I actually preferred over the Robert Fitzgerald version. Her version just kind of felt a little easier to follow. I feel like she kind of modernized like how the story was told a little bit, and that like it was a more of a one-to-one translation from Homer's original Odyssey, but like the way that she told the story, I felt like it was just easier to follow. At least that's what I remember. It was a lot easier for me to follow it than when I listened to the Iliad, which I did read the Robert Fitzgerald translation of the Iliad, and I got lost like at certain points. I had to watch some videos, analyses, and certain things kind of to help me out. But Greek mythology is something I've always been a fan of, and I just wanted to kind of lay out that I'm not like an expert in any of this, and I think I made that obvious when I was like describing what I do know, what I've read. Um, so anyway, enough of my babbling. Let's get into the spoilers. So Christopher Nolan's retelling of the Odyssey, it sticks pretty close to the original story. The basic gist is the same, though there are some notable differences, as I've been saying throughout the video. For starters, the gods play little to no role in Christopher Nolan's film. They basically only get mentions through Zeus's law, which is something called Xenia, I guess, which I just learned about. I'm not going to pretend I always knew what that was. But yeah, so you get mentions of Zeus's law. There are mentions of Poseidon. There's mentions of Athena. And Athena does kind of show up, but I'll get into that in just a minute. The Cyclops sequence plays out almost identical to the myth. The biggest difference is that Odysseus doesn't trick the Cyclops in this version. The Cyclops and Odysseus and his men never really sit down and have a conversation. And the sequence where they sharpen the stick and they poke its eye out. This is the part I was talking about when I was talking about the sound. when the Cyclops screams in pain, I mean, I seriously had to cover my ears because it was just insanity. It sounded like the speakers were going to blow out. It pierced my brain. It was insane. I felt like I was in that cave with Odysseus and his men, listening to this thing just scream in pain. And then you see it kind of curl up into a ball, and it starts speaking some kind of different language that we really couldn't understand. And it sounds like it's crying almost, like it's afraid. You start to think like, holy shit, this isn't like this isn't like Polyphemus in the original myth. This is a different version of Polyphemus. This version of Polyphemus might have just been a sheep herder that found a bunch of people living in his home, eating his food, and now they just blinded him. And they do establish that he is the son of Poseidon. A little bit later in the movie, they mention, they heard him praying to Poseidon, and they refer to it like the Cyclops referred to him as father. So they do actually establish that Polyphemus is a son of Poseidon. The other notable difference is that rather than Odysseus taunting the Cyclops, ha ha, I fooled you, I'm Odysseus, ha ha, he never does that. He actually, the Cyclops like spits out a helmet, and Odysseus takes this as like an insult, and he shoots an arrow at it just to piss it off a little bit more. I actually thought that was funnier. I'm not gonna lie. I thought that was pretty funny. It's like this dude's so pissed off, like, oh, you're gonna spit a helmet at me? Well, I'm gonna shoot an arrow at you, dick. I thought it was a. Oh, it's also worth noting they don't get the Cyclops drunk either. They don't leave any wine for it. It doesn't. It just comes in. It curls up and falls asleep, and while it's sleeping, they stab its eye out, which almost adds a little bit more tension because the fact that it was like knockout drunk kind of made it it made it less likely that they were going to wake it up. Whereas like if it's asleep on its own, there's a chance it could wake up. So I almost feel like that kind of plays into like more of a horror vibe, which that is what I got from this whole sequence. And I know Christopher Nolan has expressed interest and wanted to do a horror film, so this and the Circe sequence, which I will get into a little bit later, all that is evidence of that. So the next thing I want to talk about is the Last Dragonian sequence. Now, it does play out a bit differently in this one. In this version, Odysseus and his men, I believe, you guys, anyone in the comments more familiar with this part of the story, please correct me on this because my memory is a little fuzzy on this one. I remember in the original story, they went into like a palace, and I think they actually spoke to one of the Last Dragonians, and then I think it might have even been the child, that they scared and made it run away. They made the child run away, and I'll get to Nolan's version of it, but I think it was like they spoke to a child or something, and it ran away, and then the Last Dragonians come storming in, and they just start picking up some of Odysseus's men, and they just start eating them. They're giant cannibals. The Last Dragonians were literal giant cannibals. Funny enough, I didn't learn about this sequence until well after high school. We kind of skipped around in high school. We didn't really like read the whole like Odyssey as a whole, but like we kind of skipped around, and this was one of the sequences we skipped. So, yeah, I was really happy to see that we even got this sequence in the movie. So in this version, in Christopher Nolan's, the Last Dragonians are still giant, and you could probably still come to the conclusion that they are cannibalistic, but it wasn't shown on screen. They're just really gigantic metal men that come walking, and You know, like this, you guys have seen the poster of like the size difference. Like there's Odysseus looking up at that giant. Those are the Lastrygonians, and that whole sequence is fucking insane. They just come running in and they're flinging the dudes left and right, and they're cutting them in half, and they're killing everybody, and it's just insane. And like I said, it plays out a little different than it does in the myth. In the myth, the original myth, Homer's myth, um, they're cannibals. The sequence with Cersei plays out pretty differently than in the original myth. So, like I said, and I'll go over Nolan's version first. It is just downright horrifying what happens. So when she's feeding the men and they're eating and they're just sitting there, and she starts massaging them, and then out of nowhere she starts like squeezing their heads and like forming them into pigs, and which is what she does in the myth. She turns them into pigs, but the way it plays out in this one is just downright horrifying. She's just like molding them, and they're like screaming, and you can see the other guys trying to pull food out of their mouth, but like it's like forcing them to put it back in, and it is just terrifying. It is something otherworldly, and if Christopher Nolan wants to make a horror film, I welcome it. I really do. At this point, it's too awesome to pass up on. So, yeah, I just thought the Cersei sequence was just downright horrifying. Also, when Odysseus goes in to save his men, Cersei ends up pulling a sword on him, and she turns his men back into men, and tells them to wear their masks, basically saying that they're actually they're like pigs in disguise, kind of like in a metaphorical sense, like in I think it's in The Dark Knight when someone told Bruce Wayne that his mask is Bruce Wayne, but his actual persona is Batman, and it's kind of like a metaphorical thing. It plays out very differently than in the original myth. In the original myth, Odysseus's men still get turned into pigs, but one of his men escape, and they run to him, and they tell him everything. He goes to go save them, and Hermes gives them a magical herb that makes him immune to her magic, so that when he goes to confront her and she tries to turn him into a pig, he is immune. He doesn't turn into a pig. Well, she tries to do all that. She tries to turn him into a pig. He ends up pulling a sword on her and basically says, "Release my men." And she does so. They stay there for a year, and Odysseus and Cersei basically have sex, which is a super common thing in the original myth. Odysseus basically getting laid wherever they end up. It's it's kind of I don't even care. It's hilarious. It's awesome. Then there's the underworld sequence, which plays out a little bit differently in some instances. Odysseus still talks to Agamemnon in both Nolan's version and in the myth, but and we find out about what happened to Agamemnon. If you're unfamiliar with what happens to Agamemnon when he comes back from the Trojan War, he's killed by his wife, Clytemnestra, and I think it's his cousin too, I want to say, because depending on which version of the myth I think you subscribe to for the Trojan War, Agamemnon sacrificed his daughter Iphigenia so that the gods would create winds to help the Greeks sail to Troy to carry out the war to carry out the Trojan War. So Clytemnestra killing Agamemnon was out of revenge for killing their daughter. Agamemnon also mentions that his son kills Clytemnestra. And that's also true in the original myth as well. In the original myth, though, it plays out as if it's punishing the son for carrying out the revenge of killing the woman that killed his father. Whereas in this version, Agamemnon makes a comment about how it's like he was avenging his father. So definitely a little bit of a connotation difference. Also, instead of Odysseus speaking with Achilles, he actually speaks with Sinon in this version. In Christopher Nolan's version, he speaks with Sinon. In the original, he has a talk with Achilles. There's some differences in the underworld sequence, but again, it mostly plays out the same. Odysseus is basically given a warning: anyone who eats any of the cattle will be killed. Any of Helios's cattle. In the original myth, Odysseus ends up like falling asleep on the island without eating any of the cattle. The men behind his back, they eat the cattle, and then they end up all getting killed in a major storm. The Scylla and Charybdis sequence kind of more or less plays out the same. I think they get the information from I want to say it's Circe. And after that, much like in the original myth, all of Odysseus's men or what's left of them, are killed in a major storm, and Odysseus washes up on the shore of Calypso's island. Only, unlike in the original myth, he's found by another. In the original myth, he's found by a woman who's living on the island. I don't remember her name at the moment. But in this version, it's Calypso herself. And Christopher Nolan also combines a couple of sequences here. He combines Calypso's island with the lotus eating sequence. So there's a sequence that happens like relatively at the beginning of the myth where Odysseus and his men crash on an island. They start eating some lotus plants, and they don't want to leave the island. It basically makes them high, and they're like, we don't want to leave. This is awesome. There's a pot joke in there somewhere, but A couple other notable differences are Odysseus's disguise upon returning to Ithaca. Now, again, there's really no like gods in this movie, sort of. So he's not like magically disguised by Athena as like an old beggar like he is in the original myth. Whereas in this one, he just wears a hood. He hasn't been seen in like 20 years, so naturally he could just walk around and people might not recognize him because they haven't seen him in 20 years. It plays out a little differently when Telemachus recognizes him. He actually recognizes him because Odysseus makes a reference to a story about like when he first got this hunting dog. In the original myth, Odysseus is actually speaking to Telemachus, and he tells him, I'm your father, you're my son. And when Telemachus initially, he doesn't believe him, he's like, I don't believe you, you're lying. And, Odysseus goes, no, I held you in these arms. I held you, and you were just an infant, and then I left for Troy, and Telemachus believes him. And it's this big heartfelt reunion, and yeah, it's a nice sequence. I really do like it, and I think it plays out really well in Christopher Nolan's version of the Odyssey. And to be honest, as somebody who lost his dad to cancer 3 years ago, I have to admit, if my dad like magically just popped up out of nowhere, hey, I'm back, what'd I miss? It would be hard for me to maintain any kind of composure, so I definitely understand Telemachus in that moment. The ending is also a bit different. I guess this was actually kind of a hotly debated topic even back in ancient Greece, so that's kind of interesting. I remember in high school, the ending played out like there was going to be a war between, I think, like Odysseus and like a bunch of other kingdoms or something like that. There was going to be a war, but like Athena brought peace to the land. Again, I'm probably botching this ending way wrong. So again, feel free to to correct me in the comments below. In the ending in this, they basically just admit, like, all right, eventually our society is going to collapse, it's going to fall. Odysseus and Penelope do end up reuniting after the big fight sequence between Odysseus and Telemachus and all the men, and all the suitors, I should say, not all the men, but all the suitors that were sitting around in Odysseus's house, or his palace, rather. They, Penelope, in Nolan's version, after the fight, Odysseus and Penelope end up going west. They get on a boat, they leave the kingdom to Telemachus to basically just take Ithaca into the new world going forward, and they just sail west. And Odysseus even says it's to honor his men. That's the definitive ending, and I think that's a really good way to end this version of the Odyssey. I thought it was just a really effective way to end the movie. The other thing I want to point out before I get into my overall opinion of this movie, if it's not already obvious, is the role that Zendaya played, because much like Lupita Nyong'o, who also plays Clytemnestra in this movie, she plays Clytemnestra as well as Helen of Troy. Zendaya plays Athena as well as a priestess from Troy. Now, we find out during the sack of Troy, Odysseus actually, of course, like with the original myth, he comes up with the idea for the Trojan horse. He is the one that comes up with this and, kind of helps come up with the plan and all that. During the sack of Troy, in this version, his men are seen carrying, Zendaya, the priestess, a priestess of Troy, away as she's begging and crying and screaming for her life. And they actually behead her. They literally just decapitate her. Now, you don't actually see it, like, you don't see her head come off or anything, but you do see Odysseus take his sword and cut the head off of a statue of Athena. So it is definitely implied, and we can safely assume. Now, as far as Zendaya playing Athena in this movie, we can either assume that this is Athena taking the form of the priestess from Troy as a way to play on Odysseus's guilt, or we can assume this is like the main crux of his guilt, because the main theme in this version of the Odyssey is that Odysseus is regretful. He has a lot of shame, which I thought it was completely normal. There was never a point in time where human beings were robots. So a man that goes to war and, kills somebody who's on their knees begging for their life, I feel like that really would affect you if you had anything worth a conscience. So, and if it's anything we know about Odysseus, and they do establish in this version of the Odyssey, he has a conscience. He plucks his the string on his bow as like a warning when he's hunting, just so he's being fair to the animal. The hunting dog I mentioned earlier, he saves it from being tossed over a ledge, which is really like just wow. But like, Odysseus was shown to be a compassionate man in this version of the Odyssey, and I don't think it was just regret for what happened at Troy. I think it was regret for, like, I think part of it is like he feels regret for what's happened along his journey of trying to guide him and his men home. Because if you think about it, they all die. And something I didn't mention in the review was that along the way, they start to lose trust in Odysseus in this version, not in the original myth. In the original myth, I don't remember there ever being a moment where they're like, we don't trust him. Or in this version, there is definitely parts where they're like, I don't think we don't trust you anymore. We don't, you're not telling us things, and we don't like that. So regret is definitely a main theme of this movie. And I thought Matt Damon played that really well, and Anne Hathaway, her version of Penelope was also showing signs of this theme, because you can tell there's a part of her that feels regret for like ever allowing the people in her home, or she regrets even like inviting the opportunity for it, because at a point Robert Pattinson's character, which his character's name escapes me, he figures out that Penelope has been, she made this rule that when she's done weaving, whatever she's weaving, she'll pick a new husband from the suitors. But she's been secretly going and unweaving it at night. Robert Pattinson's character figures this out. Now, his character, who he plays, he figures it out. Now, I think Mia Goth, her character, is the one that kind of spills the beans, and I think she also does in the original myth. So, you can tell there's a lot of regret with Penelope, and, Telemachus is really the only one that doesn't show, like, too much regret. He is more of, like, curiosity and, like, not wanting to believe that his dad's really gone. There's even a moment where him and Penelope, like, they start fighting about the vacant throne, and Penelope kind of puts him in his place. Not even kind of, she absolutely puts him in his place. You call this throne vacant, but I've been occupying it for 20 years. Yeah, it's and you can tell there was some regret there, because not so much that she doesn't think she can run it by herself, but like she feels like if she chooses a suitor, she's betraying her husband, the man she loves. So regret being a main theme of this version of the Odyssey, I thought was really interesting. I love this fucking movie, and that's my opinion of it. I thought this movie was fucking amazing. One of the best movie experiences I've ever had, and unfortunately I didn't see it in IMAX. I didn't see it in Laser Ultra, Dolby Digital. I saw it on a standard movie theater screen with the standard sound, but I still really enjoyed the movie. I had a great time. Definitely looking forward to seeing it again, at least before the new Spider-Man movie comes out. As of right now, I would say it's the best movie I've seen this year. It might be the best movie I've seen in a while. I mean, definitely. So, yeah, I absolutely love this movie. Suffice it to say, I absolutely recommend going to see it. So, if you guys haven't already, I would say go see it. It fires on all cylinders. It's absolutely amazing. It's a great adaptation of the Odyssey, and it's just another great film for Christopher Nolan's filmography. If you guys want to know more about the Odyssey and the Iliad, or you want to know more about like its central themes, or like more of like a deep dive on stuff and really what an impact it's had on the world, I highly recommend this channel. I just found her not too long ago. Her channel's called Moan Inc. The person that hosts this channel, her name is Erica Stevenson. She is incredibly knowledgeable about a lot of this stuff. The Odyssey, the Iliad, just, Greek mythology in general. She really knows her stuff. I definitely recommend checking her out. I'll throw her channel link in the description below. This has been a long one. This is going to be a fun video for me to edit. So, anyway, guys, that's all I have for you today. If you have seen the Odyssey, or if you're a fan of the original myth from Homer, let me know in the comment section below. I love this shit. So, yeah, let's talk about it. But anyway, guys, that's all I have for you today. And until next time, I'm Justin Crumley, and this is Cujo Productions saying, stay awesome.